Thank you so much for having me. This is more people in one place than I've seen since the last Charlie Kirk event I was at, so it's hilarious. So I notice everyone's been talking about Epstein tonight, and I want to kind of differ from the crowd a little bit in saying that I watched Ben Shapiro yesterday, and no, before you boo me, I thought he made a really solid point. He's like, it happened a long time ago. Who cares? And by the way, we should trust the government and whatever the bureaucrats tell us. And by the way, it's wrong to ask a lot of unauthorized questions. So I just want to go on the record to say that, I think that's absurd. And it's exactly the kind of thinking that I personally voted against in the last election. In the last election, I spent a lot of the month of October campaigning with and for the president. I voted for the president. I never vote for anybody generally. I know they're always telling you, you must vote or you can't have an opinion. Oh, shut up. I don't like to vote, but I did vote this time. And I don't like to vote because I don't believe in any of them. And this time I really felt like I know Trump well. I love Trump personally. And what we were looking at was just so awful and totalitarian and stupid. And it wasn't even the arguments that I disagreed with from the Kamala Harris. It's weird to even say her name now. Who was that exactly? It was like a bad dream. But it wasn't even so much the arguments I disagreed with, though I definitely disagreed with the arguments. It was the style of argument that drove me completely bonkers, summarized most crisply by shut up racist. Whatever you said, it was shut up racist. And it's like, but wait, first of all, I'm not a racist, but that's not even the point. The point is, I just told you what I think. I just asked you an entirely legitimate question, mostly, what the hell are you doing? And rather than answer it, you didn't pay me the respect that you would a human being. You treated me like a slave or an animal by telling me to stop barking. Shut up, racist. And I won't put up with that because I'm not a slave or an animal. I'm an American citizen, an adult man who pays his taxes. So, I ask people questions for a living, and very often I get answers that I don't care for, that I disagree with, that I think are stupid. But at least they're answers. At least the person responding is treating me like a human being with a soul created in the image of the Creator. He's paying me the respect that every human being is due. When you ask a direct question to someone in charge, you are due. That person is morally bound to give you an answer. He's not bound to agree with you, but he's bound to stop and answer your question. And the left never did that. They would dismiss you out of hand. You are not worth listening to. Be quiet. And that's, of course, where the impulse to censorship comes from. It comes from the belief that you don't deserve to speak because you're not fully human. They own you. And that's what I voted against above all. I voted against a million different things that I hated about the last administration. Their insane desire to start pointless wars around the world. Their total unwillingness to protect this country domestically, to protect the people who live here, to protect the territorial integrity of the country, bringing in tens of millions of people illegally, giving them free stuff the second they get here, making a mockery of citizenship. I hated all of that. I hated all of that. But the thing I hated most was their total unwillingness to answer any question about why they were doing what they were doing, because it was just too insulting. And every single time I would just feel like raising the middle finger and screaming obscenities, which is not an adult response, I'll concede, but that's how I felt. And I think that's really at the heart of why the Epstein thing is so distressing. I mean, the guy was some weird sex freak who was abusing girls. We knew that. But the fact that the U.S. government, the one that I voted for, refused to take my question seriously and instead said, case closed, shut up, conspiracy theorist, was too much for me. And I don't think the rest of us should be satisfied with that. And by the way, let me just say really quickly, because I was so mad about it that I think I found out part of what's going on. I think we are going to find out more. And I think the truth, for whatever it's worth, in case you're interested, is that the DOJ didn't release lots of incriminating sex videos with Epstein and his billionaire pals because they don't have them. They don't have them because when the original search warrant was served 2007, I think, possibly 2006, I think 7, it was basically designed to protect Epstein. The search warrant was written in such a way to make sure that the feds never got their hands on the actually incriminating evidence. It's another way of saying the cover-up has been going on since 2007, almost 20 years. And so the real question is not, was Jeffrey Epstein a weirdo who was abusing girls? Yes, we can answer that. The real question is, why was he doing this, on whose behalf, and where did the money come from? And those are the questions that need to be answered. And I think it's entirely fair to ask them. And it's not adequate to say anyone who asked them is somehow desecrating the memory of little girls who died in Texas. I'm not going to put up with that answer. I don't care who gives that answer. That is not acceptable. And I think the real answer is Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of intel services, probably not American. And we have every right to ask, on whose behalf was he working? How does a guy go from being a math teacher at the Dalton School in the late 70s with no college degree to having multiple airplanes, a private island, and the largest residential house in Manhattan? Where did all the money come from? And no one has ever gotten to the bottom of that because no one has ever tried. And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty. There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying that. There's nothing even anti-Israel about saying that. I've spent my entire life pretty much in Washington, where I knew and loved a number of people, including one very close person who worked at CIA. That has never prohibited me from saying, I think the CIA has done some horrible things, murdered a bunch of people, participated in the murder of a sitting U.S. president. It's got a whole trail of crimes. That doesn't make me a disloyal American. It doesn't make me anti-American in any sense. I was born here. My family's been here for hundreds of years. I love this country. That's why I live here. So criticizing the behavior of a government agency does not make you a hater. It makes you a free person. It makes you a citizen. You're allowed to do that because you're not a slave. You're a citizen. And you have a right to expect that your government will not act against your interests, and you have a right to demand that foreign governments not be allowed to act against your interests. That's not creepy. It shouldn't be forbidden. And yet all of us have trained ourselves to believe that you can't say that somehow, that that's like too naughty and forbidden. And the effect of making that off limits has been to create a lot of resentment, and I'll say it, hate online, where people feel like they can't just say, like, what the hell is this? You have the former Israeli prime minister living in your house. You have had all this contact with the foreign government. Were you working on behalf of Mossad? Were you running a blackmail operation on behalf of a foreign government? By the way, every single person in Washington, D.C. thinks that. I've never met anyone who doesn't think that. I don't know any of them that hate Israel, but no one feels they can say that. Why? And I think the longer that we play along with it, the more subterranean and creepy and hateful the conversation actually becomes. So I think it's better just to say it right out loud. Did this happen? And of course, that question has been asked to the government of Israel, and their answer is, we're not going to tell you. And I think our answer should be, no. As long as we're sending you money, if you were committing crimes on our soil, we have an absolute right to know, did you do this or not? And yet everybody has been so brainwashed into thinking that's somehow an expression of hate or bigotry, when it's not. It's a baseline question that every U.S. citizen has a right to an answer on. What the hell was this? And by the way, if it turns out that it was nothing at all, that somehow Jeffrey Epstein really did earn $165 million giving tax advice to somebody, which is, for the record, a lot more than most people pay their accountants, and that none of this was actually a foreign intel operation, and that there was no blackmail involved, that actually Bill Gates was just hanging on the island because the weather was especially good. No one was videotaped doing anything immoral or illegal, and then that was used against them to get them to obey. If all of that is false, then just tell me how it's false. But don't call me a lunatic, And when Fox News runs a piece, as they did yesterday by Hugh Hewitt, saying that anybody who's got even more questions about Epstein is some kind of nutcase with an unhappy personal life, who's spending too much time on Twitter in the fervid fever swamps of conspiracies, up yours, buddy. Then why don't you answer the question then? Don't let anybody insult you, anybody, and I mean anybody, ever get away with insulting you instead of answering a legitimate question. Okay? Ever. And by the way, you will hear certain people say, well, that means you hate the person. No, it doesn't. I've got a bunch of kids. I would never let them get away with that. If I caught one of my kids, smoking weed in the bathroom at my house, I was like, are you smoking weed in the bathroom? Shut up, racist! You hate me! No, you're my child. I don't hate you. Answer the freaking question. Were you smoking weed in the bathroom or not? I'm not the criminal here. You seem to be. So I just think it's really important to get into that headspace. And even now, when people talk about this topic, I can promise you, since I spent all day on the phone yesterday on this topic, with informed people, they're like whispering certain words. And I'm like, why are we whispering? Why should I be ashamed as an American about wanting to know what the hell that just was? Why should I be embarrassed? I'm not the bad guy here. Why should I be embarrassed to ask what's in this war for us? We got to go to war. Shut up. You're a bigot if you don't want it. First of all, I'm not a bigot. But second, that's kind of not the point. The point is, what's in it for us? Why is this a good idea? Shut up. And it's exactly the style of argument that I voted against, and I will never accept it. I don't care who does it. I will never accept that. Give me a legitimate answer, a reasonable answer, a sincere answer, a good faith answer. We may disagree. You may say, as a good friend of mine who's like totally deranged, but a good person, said to me yesterday, Iran is the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Reading the talking point that apparently everyone, a bumper sticker that is for sale somewhere, I guess. And I'm like, okay, I don't even know what that means exactly, but how many Americans have been killed by Shia terrorism in my lifetime, which is 56 years? I can't think of any. I'm sure there have been some in the United States. There have been Shia terror attacks sponsored by Iran in the U.S. I can't think of any. There was 9/11. That was a Sunni terror attack. And then there's the drug epidemic, which has killed more than 1 million people during that same period. People I know, my next-door neighbor's kid, dead. A bunch of people I know have died. And a bunch have been totally screwed up and taken out of life, basically. Their lives have been hollowed out. They're husks. They've been totally destroyed by drugs. That's the reality that I live in the United States. So you're telling me Iran is a bigger threat than the people peddling this garbage? I don't think so. Not where I live, it's not. Oh, shut up. And the person literally said, we're going to have to agree to disagree. Disagree with what? What are you even talking about? But at least he gave me an answer. He didn't say, oh, you hate so-and-so. He didn't go immediately to motive. Okay, so this is always the tell. This is when you know you're dealing with someone who has zero interest in getting to the truth of the question and instead is trying to make you be quiet in order to roll over you and make you obey. And the tell is when they go immediately to motive. Well, you just hate some group, or you're taking money from some other group. And neither one happens to be true in my case, but I always feel like saying, well, okay, what if I am getting paid? Or what if I have some kind of creepy bigotry? Which I don't, because I think it's immoral. God created individuals. Each one knows the hairs on your head. Each person has a soul. No person is seen by God as a member of a group. Each person is seen by God as an individual. So I don't like that. And I really don't. I'm not just saying that. And I mean every individual on the planet, regardless of what he looks like or what he believes. That is true of every person. And I sincerely mean that. But even if I didn't, maybe I was some full wacko. And maybe I was taking tons of money from some bad country, one of the bad countries you're not allowed to talk about or like. Qatar! That's the most hilarious. Qatar is kind of controlling our conversation. Qatar. Evil Qatar. I am laughing. I've actually been to Qatar. It's awesome. Never taken a dollar from the Qataris or the Qataris or whatever they're called. It's a great country. But whatever. But even if I was like on the payroll of Qatar, which I guess I can't now, but anyway, even if I was, it still wouldn't make the question any less relevant. Why is this a good idea? And their refusal to answer that question lets you know right away that you are not dealing with a person of good faith. You're dealing with a propagandist who is trying to control you. And I would say at exactly that point, that's when you say out loud, I know who you are. This is all fake. You can't even answer the question. You're trying to make me shut up because I'm a bigot, like the liberals did 7 months ago. And that's why we voted them out. So I'm not putting up with that. I voted against this, and I won't tolerate it. So the second point I would make, before maybe taking a couple of your hostile questions, I hope, about Qatar, is I was brooding about this today. What about the Epstein story is so uniquely infuriating? And I'll just say, I mean, I've never met Epstein, but I mean, I know a million people who knew Jeffrey Epstein. It is true that he was around. Like, everyone knew Jeffrey Epstein. I don't think I was cool enough to actually meet him, but like, he was just a guy who was kind of circulating around, like this rich guy who knew everybody. What is it? And everyone knew he was a creep, but then there are a lot of creeps in that world. Just telling you what you probably know already. What is it about Jeffrey Epstein that's so infuriating to people? So infuriating that it's actually causing seismic political problems, and I hope that they'll address it and it'll get better. I really do. But what is it? I'll tell you what it is. It's the frustration of normal people watching a certain class of people get away with everything every single time. That's what it is. And that drives me absolutely bonkers. By the way, it's one of the things that bothers me about immigration. You know, as someone who got arrested in Syracuse, New York as a kid because I had an expired driver's license and brought to a cell, I'm watching people come. That actually happened. I have done time. It does change a man. Yes, I joined a gang. But I watch, 60 million people come into the country illegally or overstay their fake refugee status or whatever. I mean, the whole thing's a scam. And they get housing vouchers and free education and free cell phones and plane tickets. It's like, wait a second. Not only are they not getting punished for breaking American law, as I would and have, they're getting rewarded for it. The unfairness of it drives you crazy. And it's particularly galling in the case of Jeffrey Epstein and the whole constellation of people around Jeffrey Epstein, all of whom seem to be getting away with scams. And how do you know they're getting away with scams? I'll tell you how, because they're useless and they're rich. So how do you come to a place where some of the least impressive, most useless people who have no actual skills become billionaires? How's that legitimate? And by the way, if you ask this question, at least in Washington, it's like, oh, well, yeah, it sounds like you're a socialist. Sounds like socialism. Yeah, okay, I'm a socialist now. All right. I was a Qatari agent or a bigot. Now I'm a socialist. All right. Leaving aside my committed socialism, can you answer the question? How did Bill Ackman get $9 billion? Bill Ackman, a pretty impressive guy? I know Bill Ackman. No. Bill Ackman's like well-connected and super aggressive. That's it. And I think, well-connected, super aggressive people deserve a fair living like everybody else. But if you're accruing $9 million just because you're willing to do anything, I don't know why we have to pretend that's good. How did Epstein get 4 Gulf Streams? How did he get an island, a massive ranch in New Mexico, the biggest house in New York? Like, what is that? Like, at some point, the basic economics really matter. And they matter because, not that it's bad that rich people are getting richer, it's bad that everyone else is getting poorer. And it's especially bad that young people can't afford homes. Let me just put a very precise point on this. If you want a measure of how your economy is doing, I personally favor eliminating GDP as a measure. I don't even know what that is. It's clearly not relevant. They tell me Japan has a stagnant GDP. Have you been to Tokyo? It's the single most radicalizing experience you'll ever have because it's just so nice. You lost the war? Really? Can we lose a war and wind up like this? GDP. No. I don't know what even that is. The total economic activity. Oh, no. My measure is really simple. I got a bunch of kids. Can they afford houses with full-time jobs at like 27, 28? And the answer is no way. And the answer is that 35-year-olds with really good jobs, can't afford a house unless they stretch and go deep into debt. And I just think that's a total disaster. That's a complete disaster. Why? 2 reasons. One, if people don't own things, they don't feel ownership of the country they're in. And the country gets super volatile because people feel like they've got nothing to lose. When you have a lawn, trust me, you're thinking long term. Second, it's really hard to have a family without a house. It is. It's like super fun to live in an apartment if, there's like a bar downstairs, you're in a cool neighborhood. I'm in East Village. It's so cool. Try to have 3 kids. You're not going to have 3 kids there. You can't. Nobody wants to raise their kids in that neighborhood. Nobody wants to raise their kids in an apartment. People do it because they have to. Nobody wants to. People want a little house, not some McMansion, just a little normal house. That is the actual American dream. And that is what is totally unattainable for young people. And so the only young people in general that you will ever meet who have houses are young people whose parents help them. And God bless their parents. That's a perfectly great thing to do for your kids. But most people's parents can't afford to do that because they're already in debt from their pointless college degree. So that is a national emergency. And I know that there are certain cable channels that are spending all this time talking about, they're about to elect a socialist in New York City, which obviously I'm opposed to it. He's not even a real socialist. He's like a trainee vax, rich kid liberal guy. Mom Donnie. He's a fake leftist, but whatever. Why do you think that's happening? One of the reasons it's happening is because normal people with normal jobs no longer believe they can win in this system and that all the money is going to the worst people. And no one even stops to ask, what the hell is going on? How did Bill Ackman get so rich? I know he went on CNBC and talked down Herbalife. Bet against companies by driving down their stock prices. That's what he's been accused of. I'm not accusing him here because he's sue me if I do. I'm just suggesting others believe that might have happened. He's already threatened to sue me for saying that. But there are plenty of people who do that. And I'm not saying even that it should be illegal. What I'm saying is that our leadership class should say something about it and should assign a moral value to it. And if you're getting rich by loaning money to people at incredibly high interest rates, that's something you're going to have to talk to God about. That is not good. That is not virtuous. That's disgusting. And the fact that nobody feels free to say that, nobody feels like you can just say 30% on a credit card? Why is anybody paying a credit card bill? I said to somebody recently, I feel like I'm very moderate and sensible and, well, yeah, that's what they used to call it. It was forbidden. I said to someone recently, we really need a political party where people just it's the, hey, I'm not paying my credit card bill party. And let's just bring down Citibank. Just not permanently, maybe permanently. But credit card debt is the single biggest cause of human suffering that I'm aware of in the United States. It's not Iran. Iran's not doing that. Oh, you, a tool of the Ayatollah. No. I'm actually Episcopalian, not Shiite. Not a tool of the Ayatollah. I'm just very committed to observing physical reality and drawing my conclusions from that. I'm what we call a physicalist. I believe in the things right in front of me, the things I can touch and smell. And the people I can touch and smell are suffering not from Iran, not from Qatar. They're suffering from their credit cards and their inability of their kids to buy a house. Yeah. I don't think Dan Crenshaw is sold on this. Dan Crenshaw believes our threats are in other countries. Okay, they may be, but how are they bigger than credit card interest? So I suggest to this person, who's a really good guy, I was like, hey, why don't we start, I'm not going to pay my credit card bill party, or I'm not going to pay my mortgage. Because they always say, if the very rich, if you borrow enough from a bank, you're kind of in charge of the bank because they need you to pay them back, so they're totally happy to negotiate terms with you. But if you borrow a little bit from the bank, they'll just take your house away. So what if people got together and just decided, wait a second, 30% interest is a lot, especially since they're pushing credit cards on kids like crack. And I know that conservatives are always like, well, it's your fault if you don't pay back the credit card. Yeah, okay, it's my fault, but maybe it's a little bit their fault too. They're pushing this crap on kids. So I say to this guy, maybe just people get together, not like everybody, but just a couple million people are not going to pay our credit cards, and just bring the bank to its knees, and the CEO weeps on television, they readjust it down a little bit. And he goes, oh, no, that's radical. That's too radical. And I'm like, I don't think I'm very radical. I think I'm like very moderate, super moderate. I hate change. My parents got divorced. I hate change. I like things to be exactly the same every day. I'm not radical. What I am is very worried that if we don't do something really soon, we're going to wind up like New York City. That there's going to be actual radicalism. And that radicalism will take very unhelpful forms. And you're going to see race and ethnic hatred that's real. And that you're going to see people behaving in hard-to-control ways. If you deny people what they actually want long enough, and instead substitute things that you claim they should want, like bombing Iran, you know? I mean, I'm not for Iran, where you spend all day telling me that it's so important that, you know, boys not playing girls' soccer teams, whatever. I agree. I hate the tranny stuff passionately. I think you should keep the boys off girls' soccer teams. But I don't know. It kind of feels like you're feeding me appetizers. At some point, I want to look around and see a better country. I want to see a country I recognize. I don't want to see people sleeping on the sidewalk. I don't want to see people ODing on drugs. I want to know where those drugs coming from. Why can't you stop it? You've got the U.S. military. Don't you have SEAL Team 6? Like, what are they doing today? Don't you have Delta Force? You could give me another segment about how impressive the U.S. military is? I believe you. Why aren't they employed to make my country better? Why are my cities disgusting? I don't even want to go there. It smells like weed and halal food. And you're lecturing me about how it's a great moral victory that I kicked the boys off the girls' soccer team? Good, I'm so glad. But let's do the real stuff, like making New York livable. And create an economy where my kids can have kids. How about this? How about we just make the measure really super simple? Can my children have without the benefit of like the great luck I have had, can they have a roughly approximate life that I had? Or how about just a middle-class life? Can they like get married young, as I did, and like have 4 kids and, you know, take a couple jobs, work hard and all that stuff? But in the end, it's like, fine. Can they do that? Or is that like so remote a possibility that you need to tell me that Iran is the real threat? Take my mind off the fact that you stole all the money and screwed up my country beyond recognition. So I guess what I would say before I have an actual aneurysm is, unless we say to the people in charge, we are going to determine what's important, you need to listen to us, your voters, about what we actually care about. I'll take a lecture for about 10 minutes. I can do that. I went to school. You know, I'm used to sitting there and being like, oh, yeah, okay, the Axis powers, that's so important. Thank you for telling me. I can take a lecture for about 10 minutes, and they're like telling me Iran is the greatest sponsor of terrorism. Okay, that's great. I hate Iran. Got it. But at some point, I want to pipe up and say, yeah, but what are you going to do about Union Station in Washington, D.C., which is filled with passed-out drug addicts with spreading urine stains? Like, it wasn't that way. I was here. How did that happen, and why aren't you fixing it? And by the way, if you don't fix it or even acknowledge it, dude, bad things could happen. Like, wake up. The time is to wake up out of your freaking fantasy world where you think telling the rest of us to shut up is enough. If you keep doing that, you know, this could go in dark directions. So I think it's so important for every person to look around and make your own decisions about what's important. What's important to you? What around you in your life? What do you see in your family, among your friends, in the town that you live in that's going wrong? Those are the biggest problems. Not what some shill on television is telling you your biggest problems are. He can shut up, but he won't. But look around. What's the biggest problem in your life? And if you're burdened by a car loan or some credit card payment you can never actually make, if you can't afford to make the full payment on your credit card 2 months in a row, that's a crisis, okay? That's a crisis. If you're in the hole to DraftKings to a point where you can't pay, you know, I'm serious. These are huge problems, and most of them are money related. And if they're not solved, you're not getting married, and you're not having children, and you're not going to have a happy, fulfilling life, period. And they tell you, oh, it's all about values. Yeah, okay, values. You can't afford a house? I don't care what your values are like. You're not having 4 kids in an apartment. So you need to be heard on that. And anyone who tells you, oh, shut up, racist, hoist the middle finger and tell them, keep talking to me that way, pal, and we'll punish you. Anyway, sorry, excuse me. Do we have any hostile questions about Qatar? Yes. Well, that's so nice. Tell your mom I love you or her. Okay, your mom does too. Any questions? Yes, sir. What do I think about amnesty for farm workers? I think it's the most grotesque thing I've ever heard. Are you joking? Amnesty for farm workers? We have like 60 million illegal aliens in the country. The country bears no resemblance to the country I grew up in, and it's not better, it's worse. So I'm not going to sit for another lecture from anybody telling me we need to import more people to write code or pick grapes or any other task. Period. It hasn't worked. The country hasn't gotten richer. It hasn't become more unified. Those words should burn on the tongue of anyone who utters them. How dare you talk like that? Amnesty. How about deportation? What about that? I mean, look, and let me just say, people say all kinds of things. It doesn't mean it's happening, but I think it's worth being a little paranoid about it. I mean, I think everyone in this room is paranoid. It's important to make sure even the people you love are true to their word. Doesn't mean you hate them. Again, I don't take my kids at their, I love my kids more than anything. I don't automatically believe everything they tell me because I'm not a moron. Because I understand that people don't always say the truth. So, but anyway, yeah, any kind of amnesty is not only a bad idea, it's like outrageous. Anyway, sorry, I've been told to take the mics. I'm sorry, I know you guys have good provocative questions about Qatar, but I've been asked to talk to this guy.
How you doing tonight, sir?
I'm spun up, baby.
First off, I'd like to thank you for coming to this event. I'm 20 years old. I've been watching you for the past 12 years of my whole life. Every single night, I've always listened to you, so thank you for coming. We love to listen to your opinions, listen to you preach basically to everyone. My question is, in your opinion, we have individuals in this country that are full citizens that are also full citizens of other countries. In your opinion, how can somebody pledge allegiance to two countries at the same time, and is that something that we should be allowing?
I mean, I think your question says it all. Obviously, that's absurd. I quote the New Testament, but I also refer to common sense when I say that no man can serve two masters. It's not possible. I only have one wife for that reason. You say to your wife, I'm going to take another wife, but I'm going to love you just as much. Nothing's going to change. My wife's going to look at me like, no, it's one wife. Because you can only really pledge your loyalty to one person or one country. That's just a fact. And there's also a sense, and this is relevant to me, and I know you're speaking about Israel, but it's not just Israel, to be honest. I think it's a huge problem. I think anybody, by the way, who serves in a foreign military should lose his citizenship immediately. There are a lot of Americans who've served in the IDF. They should lose their citizenship. There's a lot of Americans who've served in Ukraine, and they should lose their citizenship. You can't fight for another country and remain an American, period. Obviously. I mean, it's like not even, it's so funny how all of us have been cowed into being like, oh, that's hate speech. No, it's not. You don't hear hate in my voice because there isn't any. It's just an obvious recognition of the truth. But there's a more insidious thing, and I say it's not just Israel. I'm not just trying to like give myself cover. I'm being honest. There are a ton of countries that offer citizenship, actually, some of which I love. I have been offered citizenship in a couple different countries that I really like, and I thought about it. And then I thought, no, there's something about being lashed to the mast. Like, everyone can see that America's in trouble, the demographic trends are really bad, and the country's decaying, its cities are falling apart. So you're like, oh, wow, you know, maybe I should flee. And then I'm like, my ancestors are from here. My parents are buried right across from my kitchen. I'm staying here. And the second you make that decision in your head, like, I don't care what happens to America, I will be here, it totally changes your attitude. You're like, I don't even care. It's my country. And they've been here for so long and fought in all of these wars. My ancestors, and I'm sure yours, would be totally shocked by some of the conversations. Foreign flags in the Congress? Are you joking? Get out. And so, no, once you decide you're all in on your country, it really changes the way you approach everything. And by the way, it should be the baseline requirement. You shouldn't be allowed to serve in government if you're not a U.S. citizen or you're a dual citizen. Are you joking? Of course not. And I would love to know what the justification is. And of course, there isn't one, which is why they're allowed to just write you off as some sort of like freak, some internet freak, hater, Nazi, whatever. No, I'm not. Just an American who loves my country, and I think it's fair to demand that the people running my country love it every bit as much as I do.
All righty, Tucker. Thank you for being here today. My question is mainly focused on national security. I have a question first and then a proposal. I'll see how you go about that.
Now you're freaking me out. You got a Rumble hat on. I love you already. All right. I'm going to stop and have an Alp, which is America's premier nicotine pouch.
Go for it. All righty. So I was born in Cuba. I came at the age of 2. So I can attest to the fact that the socialist experiment doesn't work at all.
Yep.
And that America is the best country in the world.
Yep.
So,
I agree.
You know, I'm a U.S. citizen, and I'm very proud of that, and that's why I stand for my country every day. But I have a question specifically about national security.
All right, hit me with it, baby. No preamble. Just go right to it. You can't scare me.
So, for example, I would say that the head of the snake for a lot of the spying that goes on in the United States is Cuba. For example, we've found evidence that Venezuela, Nicaragua, like all the issues with immigration are because of the socialism going on in Latin America.
Yes.
And Cuba's an outpost for human trafficking, drug trafficking. We have Chinese spy bases on the island. We had Russian missile testing under Biden. And then on top of that, Cuba doesn't even recognize Gitmo as American territory. So my question for you is, what should the United States stance be on Cuba and the liberation thereof? And my proposal is, if you're willing to do some sort of documentary on Cuba, and if I could help you out on that.
Well, I always appreciate the offer of assistance. I would say we've had a Cuba embargo. So the revolution was 1959. So that was, well, 60. Could that really be 66 years ago? That's crazy. And we've had an embargo for much of that time. And you just said yourself, it hasn't worked. It hasn't liberated Cuba. The same regime is in charge, and it is still, working to undermine the interests of the United States. So what we're doing isn't working. I think that's a good place to start. So I know from living in D.C. that whenever someone tells you, like, it's not working, we need to double down on it, they're lying. So I think we need to reassess, are sanctions really the answer? And if so, tell me how that's worked. Second, I would say, I'm sure everything you say is true. I don't think that most Americans, and I know the U.S. government doesn't, spend a lot of time thinking about our own hemisphere because we're so focused on places like Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Gaza, Israel, all great places. I'm not, attacking anybody, but I'm just saying those are thousands of miles in an ocean away, whereas Latin America is right there, and what happens there is a direct effect here in our migration patterns and in our drug importation. So, maybe we should focus on our own hemisphere. I think you made a powerful case for that, and I don't understand why the U.S. military is stationed in Japan, Korea. I mean, I know that you get a long answer, how we're spending $1 trillion to secure places that pose no imminent threat to us while ignoring our own continent, ignoring Mexico, which is the most hostile country in the world, the United States. Obviously, there's migrants coming through Mexico. How are they our ally? Canada, how are they our ally? Maybe we should spend some time reorienting here. So, anyway, that's my answer. I'm against socialism, obviously. That's why I'm worried about our economic system, because I think we're about to get socialism if we don't pull back from this.
All right, we got one more question.
One more question.
Hey, Tucker, I'm a big fan. I would love to work for you. I did give my resume to Steve Bannon. It would be hilarious if you two fought over me. I'm just saying. That would be great.
It'd be like a real bitchy cat fight.
It'd be a hell of a story, yeah. My family has fought for this country. I voted MAGA 3 times. My generation, just like you said, is convinced they can't trust the institutions and the administration, even this administration after last Monday. America first means America first, not foreign governments, not rich pedophiles. I have a lot more about the history, but I'm going to get through it out of respect for everybody. Basically, my questions are this. How does anybody possibly expect us to have any trust in our government, pay taxes, accept draft orders if these elites are not held accountable, right? And how am I anti-Semitic? My great-grandfather killed Nazis, and I brag about it. My mother's doctor was a Holocaust survivor, and everyone calls Trump a Nazi. My family in Chicago and my family in Ireland, which are both liberal hellholes, right? And it's pretty convenient that if he did criticize Israel, everyone could just say, look, I told you so, but that's not the point. Anyways, and finally, and by how am I anti-Semitic when all my sources are Jewish, Israeli publications, and Holocaust survivors? And finally, and by far the most important, why can I burn an American flag in my country, but I get a mark by my name if I burn Israel's? Like, how?
I think that's an entirely fair question. It's totally outrageous. You got 65 million people here illegally, according to the administration, and the only ones who are deported are ones who criticize a foreign country. I don't understand it. It's driving people insane, actually, and it's making people angry in a bad way. And I go on, X, and I see stuff. It's like, I don't even want that in my head. I don't want that. I don't want to marinate in that. I'm a happy person. I have a great life. I love this country. I love my dogs. I love my children. I love my wife. And you go online, and people are so mad. I mean, I've never seen anything like the rage online. And I get it. I get it. That's the worst part. I get it. People go crazy after a while if you totally ignore their concerns, if you call them names rather than answering their questions. I really think we need to agree, and this would include the Department of Justice, which is running around, it's got task forces attacking,